In the European Parliament, the Commission President rules out any option of renegotiating the current Brexit deal.
The deal we have achieved is the best deal possible. It's the only deal possible. And so we cannot... There is no room whatsoever for renegotiation.
Also coming up this hour, UK Coast Guard pick up 6 more migrants claiming to be Iranian as they cross the English Channel. Their dinghy was spotted in the early hours of this morning. So far, more than 100 people have made the same journey in the last month. Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola has hailed Raheem Sterling as an incredible human being for confronting racism in football after the player was allegedly racially abused during City's Premier League match at Chelsea on Saturday. Scientists from NASA find signs that major glaciers in the east of Antarctica are melting away, part of the continent that was thought previously to be more stable. Hello, very good evening to you. Welcome to BBC News. We start this hour with some breaking news. Reports that at least one person has died after a shooting in the French city of Strasbourg, close to a Christmas market. Our correspondent Sophie Long has been following developments, of which there have not been many so far. Sophie, this has just come into us.
Yeah, you're right. In the last hour or so, we were getting reports on social media that people had heard gunshots in the centre of Strasbourg. Now, we have now had it confirmed by the French authorities that one person has been killed and at least 3 others have been injured. So that's coming from the regional authority and also confirmed by the local fire department there. Now, as you can imagine, a lot of traffic on Twitter about this. One Italian MEP has tweeted. He wrote that there had been shots fired in the crowd at a street market and that there were people dead and wounded. Some pretty chilling videos on Twitter as well. We can see people seeming to cower on the floor and running away in fear. There's also pictures of armed police that are making their way to the city centre tonight. So a Christmas market there, as you can imagine, 10th of December, very busy time of year for them. Another local journalist who actually lives on a street in the city centre has said that there were a dozen shots fired, 1 or 2 to begin with, and then they came in bursts. Another press officer for the European Parliament, this has all taken place, of course, when the European Parliament in Strasbourg is sitting, wrote that there was panic in the centre following the sound of gunfire and that police with guns are running through the streets. So what we know at the moment is this is very much an ongoing incident, but we do know that one person has been killed and at least 3 others injured.
Sophie, thank you very much. Well, let's talk now to the Labour MEP Richard Corbett, who's in a restaurant in Strasbourg near where the incident happened. Richard, good to speak to you again this evening despite these circumstances. What did you see and hear?
Well, I'd just come into the town centre and I noticed there was a lot of commotion. There is the Christmas market on. I wasn't sure what that was about. And I got to the restaurant and it was actually locked. You couldn't get in, and I thought, this is odd. And then somebody inside saw me, recognised me, and they let me in and immediately locked the door. It's an Italian restaurant. We were going to have a pizza and so on. Everything around here is apparently locked down. People are not being allowed out onto the streets for understandable reasons. And the talk here is that there's some rumours say 1 dead, some say 3 dead, and apparently it's a lone gunman, but even that we are uncertain of.
Indeed, as inevitably the case in a lot of these circumstances so early after they've taken place. But as far as you can tell from inside then, that there's kind of what activity there was has started to die down?
Well, the streets are empty. People have been asked to vacate the streets, to stay inside. Indeed, I've heard from reports that nearby department stores, people are locked in, being moved up to the 5th floor for safety. Any hotels, restaurants, all the doors are locked, keeping people inside. And indeed, in the European Parliament itself, people have been asked not to leave, but to stay in the European Parliament.
Richard Corbett, MEP, thank you very much. I hope the lockdown ends as soon as it can, but and hopefully your evening starts to be a bit more peaceful. Thanks very much for that update. Well, let's talk now to Peter Fritz, an eyewitness to the shooting in Strasbourg. Peter, you've been you took some of the footage that we've been showing here on BBC News. What were you able to see and hear, and what sort of time did these events take place?
Well, what I heard shortly after 8 p.m., I should say, were two distinct gunshots and people fleeing the place. Now, I wasn't sure these were actually gunshots, and I went around the corner and I saw a person with apparently 2 shots into the head lying on the bridge here. We tried to engage in resuscitation activities. We took him into a restaurant, which I'm in right now, and we tried for 45 minutes to resuscitate him. There are no ambulance services apparently able to enter the area. Everybody told us that the ambulances have been called, but so far no sign, just some police people cordoning off the area. And after 45 minutes, we stopped the resuscitation efforts because the doctor told us over the phone that it's senseless.
That must have been a very distressing experience for all of you there. Can you tell us anything at all about the victim?
He's a tourist from Thailand, apparently in his 30s, accompanied by his girlfriend or wife. Other than that, I can't tell you what's happening, but he's definitely a foreigner, a tourist who, like so many people, came to see the Christmas market in Strasbourg.
It's a spectacular sight in your city, and one that, particularly at this time of year, would be very, very busy so close to Christmas. And presumably, I mean, from what Richard Corbett, the MEP, was telling us, the streets are now practically deserted.
Yes, they surely have an evacuation plan in place for events like these, and this plan apparently seems to have functioned pretty well, so the streets are cleared out, the streets are empty. But the downside is that even the ambulance services can't enter the area, apparently. We've waited for, as I told you, 45 minutes for some medical personnel to show up, and there was no help, and now we could do nothing but cover up the poor victim's face. And for all practical purposes, we'll agree that he won't be alive anymore.
This is, I'm sure, an evening you won't forget, and a very distressing one for you and those who are there. And I'm sure that everybody would appreciate how hard you tried to help that man who has sadly fallen victim to this shooting. Peter, thank you very much for speaking to us on BBC News this evening. Let's just take a look at the live pictures now we're getting from Strasbourg as camera crews have arrived in the city centre. This incident, as Peter Fritz was explaining, took place just after 8 o'clock local time, so just after 7 o'clock UK time. And we can see that the military presence, as well as police presence, was pretty swift. Of course, there's a certain amount of police presence because of the European Parliament being in session, but many French cities have been on alert really since the state of emergency a couple of years ago after the terrible terrorist incidents in Paris. We of course do not know what the causes of this shooting. We do know that one person is dead. We've heard that as you heard from Peter Fritz, who was there, who was part of the group of people desperately trying to save his life. So a very sad end for that man. We are waiting for new information. Reuters news agency are quoting the French police are saying that 1 person is dead, 6 are injured in gunshot attack in Strasbourg. French police sources are telling Reuters that the gunman could still be on the run. There had originally been reports that the gunman had been shot dead. It seems now, from what Mr. Fritz was telling us, that it's most likely that that was an innocent tourist caught up in these terrible events. We'll bring you more from Strasbourg during the course of this evening here on BBC News. Now, the Prime Minister has been holding talks with European leaders and officials as she tries to convince them to help her rescue the Brexit deal after today's vote in Parliament was called off because she expected to lose. Mrs May has been to the Netherlands and to Germany, and tonight she's in Brussels, where she met the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, who told her that there was no room for the withdrawal agreement to be renegotiated. Mrs May was given much the same message in Berlin when she met the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who told the PM also there's no way to change the Brexit deal. In the morning, she'd met Mark Rutte, the Dutch Prime Minister, and tomorrow she'll be in Dublin to talk to her Irish counterpart, the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, as he tries to get assurances about the Irish backstop, as it's called, which is intended to prevent checks on the Irish border if the EU and UK fail to reach a trade deal for the future relationship between the UK and the EU after Brexit. Well, back here, and Downing Street says that vote on the deal will take place by the 21st of January. That's actually a legal deadline set in the legislation. Our Europe editor Katja Adler has been tracking the Prime Minister's journey across the European continent and has sent this report.
The Prime Minister's breathless whistle-stop tour today to see a number of European leaders seemed to them rather surreal. Under attack at home, Theresa May came to the EU appealing for more.
Whatever outcome you want, whatever relationship you want with Europe in the future, there's no deal available that doesn't have a backstop within it. But we don't want the backstop to be used, and if it is, we want to be certain that it is only temporary. And it's those assurances that I will be seeking from fellow leaders over the coming days.
The EU tried hard to extinguish expectations before the Prime Minister arrived. No rewriting of the Brexit deal, they insisted. Although
there is no room whatsoever for renegotiation. But, of course, there is room, if used intelligently, is room enough to give further clarification.
But if she comes back home with clarifications alone, is that enough to help the Prime Minister? Maybe, if the EU agrees to make them legally binding, as some in the Cabinet now suggest. But EU leaders are wary about making too many compromises for the Prime Minister. They worry whatever they're willing to give her won't be enough to get the Brexit deal disliked by so many back home through the House of Parliament. Some MPs are pushing for the Prime Minister to play hardball with the EU, especially over the backstop, that Irish border guarantee.
France wouldn't accept it, Germany wouldn't accept it. Why in heaven's name should we accept it? We need to risk the money. We just say to the EU, OK, fine, it's not all one way, not what we want. What do you want? You want 39 billion, you want access to our markets? Great, that's coming off the table, by the way, in case you didn't recognise that. And we need you to start being serious.
But ever felt you were pushing hard against a closed door? This was the Prime Minister on her arrival in Berlin today. Big smiles followed, but no big breakthrough.
I can't imagine how we can substantially change anything already negotiated in these tough negotiations, which were hard for all EU countries, as well as the UK. We're not cold-hearted, but at the end of the day, decisions have to be taken in London now.
The Prime Minister had faint hopes in the Dutch at least today. Mark Rutte is very close to the UK when it comes to trade. He has a lot to lose in a no-deal Brexit. He also provides encouraging precedent. 2 years ago, he got legally binding clarification on a text the EU said was closed. But there was a catch. He had his country's parliament behind him, something Theresa May certainly doesn't.
If she thinks people are going to back down just because she seeks to blackmail them, running up against a time constraint, I think she's very wrong there. And anyhow, many of us are now convinced that no deal is better than this bad deal.
This evening, the Prime Minister is in talks with the President of the European Commission and the European Council. Preparations have already started here in Brussels for an emergency Brexit summit they've called this Thursday. More fanfare, more black cars, more red carpets. But no sign yet of a clear way forward. Katja Adler, BBC News, Brussels.
Well, back in the UK, the mood has been hardening against the Prime Minister. Rumours in Westminster that more letters of no confidence have gone into the chairman of the 1922 committee. Let's get the thoughts now of the Conservative MP George Freeman, who's in our Westminster studio. George Freeman, thank you very much for coming in to talk to us this evening. You were the chairman of Theresa May's policy board for more than a year, so I suppose part of your challenge was try and move the government away from just talking about Brexit. I mean, Brexit seems to be the only thing anyone is talking about right now, except the possibility of a leadership challenge, or at least an attempt to prompt a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Do you think that is more likely tonight than it was 24 hours ago?
Well, I fear we're now getting into the middle of an all too predictable Brexit crisis. Well, the Prime Minister having crisis talks in Europe tonight to try and find some wording that might get this deal into a place that it can get through Parliament, and I support her in that. I think the whole country supports her in that. We have to find a deal that can implement the wishes of the people to leave the EU, but in a way that works. But I think it's no surprise she's running out of runway and run room and time. There is a deadline on this. We leave the EU at the end of March, and we have to find a deal. And to my colleagues tonight who are frustrated and feeling that the only thing they can do is put in a letter and call for a leadership change, I just beg them to see that that is not the right solution. We may need to change strategy. Yes, if this deal can't get through Parliament, then I and others are urging the Prime Minister to change tack, to work cross-party and to find a Brexit that can get through Parliament. But I say to my colleagues that triggering a Conservative Party leadership contest would be a huge mistake.
You think, though, there might be a way of avoiding a contest but also allowing the party to put someone else in charge?
Look, I think if the Prime Minister reaches the point where she says to her cabinet, I can do no more, I have negotiated the best I can, and it clearly cannot get through Parliament, then I think the Prime Minister and the cabinet and the 1922 committee in Parliament have precedent for saying, OK, well, someone else now, on behalf of the party, must pick up this negotiation on behalf of the government. And the cabinet need to have that conversation, and there are several people one can think of who could have a go. In the end, these negotiations become personal. I take my hat off to the Prime Minister. She has given it her very best shot. Who knows? She may come back tomorrow with a deal that we can get through Parliament. But if not, there is a clear historic precedent for the Cabinet and the Parliamentary Party to invite somebody else to see whether they can get us through this last phase. If we can't, then we are heading, I fear, either for a no deal or for a second referendum. And I think the view in Parliament would be then for a second referendum, and I don't think that's what the people want. We haven't got time to have a leadership election. We have got to step up to the plate and find a solution in Parliament.
In many ways, then, this is a message to Theresa May herself, because presumably your fear must be that she can't get any more out of Brussels because the trust thing has kind of gone because of all the changes and shifts that have had to happen. The latest is that she's now going back saying the deal I agreed with 2 weeks ago I can't get through, but that you think perhaps a fresh face might get some fresh flexibility out of the EU.
Well, let's see what she comes back with tomorrow. But in the end, negotiations are personal, whether they're business or political or any sort of negotiation. In the end, it comes down to trust. It comes down to the ability to ask for the benefit of some doubt. It comes down to the ability to negotiate with multiple parties. Remember, this is a negotiation with the DUP, with Northern Ireland, with factions in the Conservative Party, factions in Parliament and 27 nations. This is very complex. I hope the Prime Minister can pull it off, but if she can't, my message to colleagues in Parliament is do not throw in a letter calling for a leadership change when the clock is ticking and we have to find a solution to Brexit by the end of January.
George Freeman, Conservative MP for Mid-Norfolk, former chairman of the Prime Minister's Policy Board. Thank you very much for talking to us this evening. Well, let's hear now about something else. That's the meeting the Prime Minister is going to have in Dublin tomorrow with her Irish counterpart, the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. Sean Kelly is a Fine Gael MEP and he's in Strasbourg now. Sean, thanks very much for being with us and indeed waiting while we talked about those other developments in Strasbourg this evening. Let's talk about the prospects of any kind of change in terms of the wording that might give the UK reassurance about the Irish backstop, as it's called, this position of what happens if a trade deal isn't arrived at by the time the transition period ends. So beginning of 2021, that there could be some kind of requirement that the border is kept open in this way. Do you think there's anything that the Irish government could give her that would help on this?
Yeah, thank you very much and glad to be with you. And firstly, my sympathy to those who are the victims of the attack tonight. I was actually supposed to be inside in Strasbourg tonight meeting the Singaporeans, but I told them I'd be delayed because of this interview and other matters here in Parliament. But to come to your question, there is actually very little room for manoeuvre in the substantive issues and especially in the backstop. And I think that has been said again today by people like Jean-Claude Juncker, Donald Tusk, And I think while we all have huge admiration for Theresa May, we would love to help her in any way possible to get this deal accepted in Parliament. Nevertheless, the backstop is there for a very important purpose, to written down that it will stay unless and until it's replaced by something better. Now, what is possible maybe is some kind of a guarantee that a free trade agreement or the future relationship would be speeded up, which would mean then that you wouldn't need a backstop. But there's little more that our Taoiseach can and would want to say at this stage, because everything hinges on ensuring there is no hard border on the island of Ireland and that we do not return to the bad old days of violence and so forth. The backstop is that insurance policy, and it has to stay regardless of the difficulties Theresa May has. And as I say, we have huge sympathy for them because we're very close to the United Kingdom, and of all countries, Ireland is the one that would want the United Kingdom to stay in the European Union, but also the one that would respect the decision of the people the most.
Presumably there is a point she will be able to make to Leo Varadkar tomorrow, and probably she's made it before many times, which is if the UK leaves with no deal, and there has been no deal approved because Parliament rejects this and nothing else is found in its place, that would automatically result in the kind of border crisis that everybody wants to avoid, and therefore it might be better to give a bit more of a concession at this stage to get the no-deal Brexit agreed so that crisis doesn't happen in March 2019.
Yes, in an ideal world that is what would happen. But there are two things. Number one, it doesn't guarantee anything in that respect. And secondly, there is no guarantee, even if that was done, which cannot be done from our point of view, that it would still satisfy those who want to vote against it. Because many of the Remainers are against it, many of the Brexiteers are against it as far as we know. So it's a very difficult situation, a catch-22 situation for Theresa May. But ultimately, they have to face the music towards the middle of January, and then we will have to see what will happen. Hopefully it will work out well, because nobody wants a hard Brexit, but that's entirely in the gift of those who vote in the United Kingdom.
Sean Kelly, MEP for Fine Gael, thanks very much for joining us from Strasbourg this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And we'll find out how this story, the Brexit latest developments and many others are covered on the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers in our Papers Review this evening at 10:40 and 11:30 again. Joining me tonight, Polly Mackenzie, the director of the think tank Demos, and the Conservative commentator and journalist Tim Montgomery. That's time for sport now and for a Raw Roundup at the BBC Sports Centre. It's Sarah. How are you this evening, Sarah?
I'm very well, thank you very much, Sean. It is a big night in the Champions League, though, for Liverpool and Tottenham fans. I bet they're a little bit more nervy because both clubs are bidding to make the knockout stages. Let's have a look then at how things are going. Tottenham are in Barcelona, where they need to match or better Inter Milan's result against PSV Eindhoven. They are a goal down, Ousmane Dembele scoring for the home side early on. But the good news is that Inter are losing at home to PSV Eindhoven. Hirving Lozano with the goal there. 20 minutes gone at Anfield. Liverpool are at home against Napoli. They need a 1-0 win or victory by 2 clear goals to be sure of qualification. Although if Paris Saint-Germain fail to beat Red Star Belgrade in the other group game, then Liverpool will win. It is currently goalless there, while in the other game PSG are a goal up. Edison Cavani with that one. There is full commentary on BBC Radio 5 Live. And quickly in Group A, Atletico and Dortmund are through to the last 16. Atletico lead the group by 2 points, so if they finish level on points, Dortmund have the better head-to-head record there. Porto, and then the final ones. All the details are on the BBC Sport website. Now, there is one game tonight in the Premiership. Aberdeen are taking on Livingston at Pittodrie. The home side can return to the top 6 with a victory. The score there is currently 2-1 to Livingston. Niall McGinn opened the scoring for Aberdeen, but Scott Pittman replied for the visitors. Jack McMillan has now given Livingston the lead. Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola has spoken publicly for the first time about the alleged racial abuse that Raheem Sterling faced at Stamford Bridge on Saturday. Chelsea have suspended 4 supporters from attending matches while investigations continue. Guardiola praised Sterling for his post on social media, which pointed a finger towards the press and their coverage of young black players, which he said was unfair and potentially fueling racism and aggressive behaviour.
Raheem is an incredible human being. So it's tough to understand today, you know, what happened years ago about the position for the whole history, for the black people. So, and we have to protect them. We have to protect how equal we are all together. So it's tough to understand in the 21st century still to be in that position and to be a problem, to accept the diversity like a power position that helps us to be better than everyone. We have to fight, but strictly for the human rights, from everything to make a better society for the future for everyone.
Rugby's World Player of the Year, Johnny Sexton, has committed himself to Leinster and Ireland for another 3 years. The 33-year-old fly-half has signed a contract extension with the Irish Rugby Football Union until 2021. He had a 2-year spell with Racing Metro in Paris and was linked with a lucrative return to France, but the Grand Slam winner and European Cup champion with Leinster looks like he will now end his career in Ireland. Former European track cycling champion Jess Varnish has told an employment tribunal that British cycling coaches would listen through the door during training camps as an example of the body's extreme control. She is claiming damages for wrongful dismissal and sex discrimination after being omitted from British cycling's elite squad in 2016. Of this case could affect how athletes are funded. Varnish is seeking to prove that she was an employee of British Cycling rather than self-employed. UK Sport Chief Executive Liz Nicholl is also attending the tribunal that is expected to last all week. Well, that is all the sport for now. Remember, you can find lots more on those stories, including live text commentary of the Champions League games involving Liverpool and Tottenham on the BBC Sport website. Still goalless between Liverpool and Napoli at Anfield, and Tottenham trailing 1-0 at Camp Nou against Barcelona. Back to you, Sean.
I definitely hope all of that will change by the time we come back to you. Sarah, thank you very much. Now, large glaciers in the east of Antarctica have begun melting away for the first time in a region that until now had been considered relatively stable, certainly compared with more dramatic changes on the continent elsewhere. Scientists from NASA in the United States say satellites are showing that ice streams into the ocean are speeding up, which could lead to a big rise in sea levels in the future. Our Science Editor David Shukman reports now from the UN Climate Conference taking place in Katowice in Poland.
A great chunk of ice breaks into the ocean. Antarctica holds so much frozen water that if all of it melted, the level of the sea would rise by as much as 70 meters. That's why NASA and other teams are keeping a close watch on what's happening. On a research flight, I saw for myself how the glaciers, the great streams of ice, are accelerating in West Antarctica. Now NASA has studied satellite data which reveals another region changing as well, the much larger mass of ice in East Antarctica. The glaciers there showing signs of stirring.
We've known for some time that parts of Antarctica are losing ice into the ocean, causing sea level rise. NASA has now reported that another 8 glaciers in a different part of Antarctica are also losing ice. This is an effect of the oceans changing in their temperature and taking warm water to the Antarctic ice sheet and causing it to melt.
This matters for cities around the world. Every extra bit of melting threatens the millions who live on coastlines, and that threat is now getting global attention. The future of the polar ice is being discussed here at the United Nations Climate Conference in Poland. The point of these talks is to try to prevent the increase in temperatures, to head off the rise of the oceans. And this new research shows why that matters.
I think it's a very intimidating and worrying piece of news. I think that it goes with the trend that climate change is becoming a more material issue that we have to respond to. We're not just looking at science into the future, we're thinking about issues that are affecting us now, and we have to be much more live and contemporary and push harder with our decision making.
Antarctica could not be more remote, but its ice has the potential to cause serious damage as the world gets warmer. David Schuckman, BBC News in Poland.
Well, joining me now is Dr. Gabriel Walker, who specialises in climate change. He's written a book called Antarctica, an intimate portrait of the world's most mysterious continent. Dr. Walker, thanks very much for being with us on BBC News. That's a very vivid description of a place that you've obviously had the pleasure of visiting. Before I ask you about the science of this, what for you makes Antarctica special, and how do you get a sense that you are somewhere that is so different from the rest of the planet?
The most spectacular thing about Antarctica is that humans have never lived there. It has no human history at all. We can't. It's just got ice. If you go into the centre, there's no food, there's no fuel, there's no liquid water, there's nothing. You have to take your life support system with you. So it really is. It's like still being on Earth, but being the closest you could get to the Moon or Mars or some other world. And because of that, you kind of project yourself when you go there. You go to the ends of the earth and you find no culture, no human, no existing human history, just what you take with you.
And the environment that is so much a part of that, and so much of the explanation of why there's been no human habitation. We know it's changing, but this particular report, what strikes you most about it?
I think that often you can think this is something happening at the end of the world, and you think, yeah, you know, it's kind of the same old. We know that ice is melting. It's in a very far-off place. And in a way, Antarctica, for me, it seems like it's almost a very generous continent. It doesn't really care what happens to itself. You know, in the past, Antarctica has been covered with dinosaurs and swamps when the Earth was a lot hotter. And now it's covered in ice, and both times it was probably very beautiful. But it contains in its ice a sort of history record telling us what climate change has happened in the past and what climate change is happening right now. And also it's warning us in a way that this ice is melting. When it melts, it comes for us. And this story, I was very alarmed by it because the East Antarctica, that's the bit that's supposed to be stable. And if we're now seeing signs that parts of that are going, that ice will come for us. And I just feel like, you know, I work on climate change. I work with businesses on climate change, and we're all fighting hard to change the way that we actually do business so that we can fix this thing. And I think it puts so much effort, not on so much attention, if you like, not just on Antarctica, that far-off, beautiful, remote place, but on Poland and on all of those borderlands where people are trying to fix this.
And in terms of that, I mean, effectively, as you say, because of the melting, that's the thing that could drive in sea levels. The world has adapted before. It can adapt again, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. And the world has experienced many more hot temperatures and cold temperatures. The thing is, it hasn't done it when we humans were around, and especially not in such numbers. So with 7 billion humans or more on the planet, with all these coastal cities, there's never been a time when the temperatures were heading for this, when the sea levels were heading for this. And we've built our cities according to the old sea levels, not according to the new ones. And we can't just pick up a city and move it. So this is some of the indication that we already need to be adapting. But we really have to stop this thing before it gets worse, because if we don't, we're the ones who are going to suffer. Antarctica won't care.
And Antarctica will be a little less mysterious and magical than it is right now.
I think it's going to be mysterious and magical no matter what. Always will be, I assure you.
I hope you're right. Dr. Gabriel Walker, thank you so much for talking to us. Dr. Gabriel Walker there, author of Antarctica, an intimate portrait of the world's most mysterious continent. Now it's time for a look at the less mysterious weather prospects with Nick Miller.
Hello, winds pick up now as we go through the rest of the week. It'll feel colder as a result. Cold enough tonight across easternmost parts of England, where you've got clear skies to see a touch of frost and a few fog patches again. Elsewhere, there's a lot of cloud around. Some spots of rain, but more especially some outbreaks of rain towards Northern Ireland, Wales and southwest England as that edges a little further east overnight. But if you're underneath that, it'll be a fairly mild night, but it's the further east you are, you'll see temperatures in the coldest spots close to freezing. Into tomorrow then, I notice this area of cloud and patchy rain, Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, Wales and southwest England, not moving much during the day. Elsewhere, a good deal of cloud around, especially in the morning with a few light showers, but for eastern England there'll be increasing sunshine into the afternoon. The southeasterly breeze does start to pick up, and as a result it'll feel a little bit chillier than it did today, but it's by Thursday that wind is stronger still, so it will feel much colder with wind chill numbers closer to freezing on Thursday.
Hello again. You're watching BBC News with me, Sean Lay. The headlines this hour. Shots have been fired close to a Christmas market in Strasbourg in France. French authorities say at least one person is dead. Several are injured.
The tourist from Thailand, apparently in his 30s, accompanied by his girlfriend or wife. Other than that, I can't tell you what's happening, but he's definitely a foreigner, a tourist who, like so many people, came to see the Christmas market in Strasbourg.
Prime Minister Theresa May is on a rapid tour of the European capitals, including Brussels, where she's been meeting leaders and officials to try to ask for more assurances about the Brexit deal.
What has been shown to me from those meetings is that there is a shared determination to deal with this issue and address this problem.
UK Coast Guard pick up 6 more migrants claiming to be Iranian as they cross the English Channel. In all, 100 other people have made the same journey, been detained in the last month. Manchester City's manager Pep Guardiola has hailed Raheem Sterling as an incredible human being for confronting racism in football. The player was allegedly racially abused during City's Premier League match at Stamford Bridge on Saturday. Right, let's return now to our top story this hour. The news that came into us shortly before we came on air at 8 o'clock that at least one person had died in a shooting in the centre of Strasbourg. 3 people are known to have been injured. This is in the French city close to the Christmas market. The area has been in lockdown over the last hour with people told to stay indoors and if possible move to upper floors in case the gunman was still at large. Well, let's talk to Ben Freeman, who's trapped inside a bar nearby. Ben, you're still locked in there?
Yeah, we are, yeah. I wouldn't use the word trapped. We're locked in for our own safety, I think, at the moment.
Indeed. Were you inside the bar when the shots were fired?
Yeah, so we're about 200-300 metres from where the incident happened, from what I can tell. And really, I mean, we are all now upstairs in the bar rather than downstairs.
Yeah.
The bar staff judged it was a bit safer. Sorry, the bar manager's just shouting at us, but it's all fine, I think.
So you might be able to you might be about to get the all clear.
No, she's just telling us to make friends with all our French. French
sorry,
friends
forgive
on the
me.
tables in the office.
I thought you said she was saying it was all fine. Well, look, so
No.
you're inside. Is there still activity on the streets as far as you're able to see? Any signs of police?
There seems to be. Well, like I say, Strasbourg's a very narrow street.
Yeah. Very
confined spaces, and we can't see much on the streets at all. Really, it's pretty dead for an evening on the streets. Which isn't unsurprising given circumstances.
No, quite. Absolutely. Well, look, you better get yourself another drink in that case. You could be in there for a while. Thanks very much, Ben. Keep safe.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
On the line also is James Franey. James is a journalist for France 24. He was in the area when the incident happened. James, what have you seen and heard?
Yes, so I've been in the centre of Strasbourg for the past hour, just after the gunshots were heard close to the Christmas market, which is, of course, a big tourist attraction at this time of year. What I can tell you is that police are now evacuating the city centre, and they're telling all residents to stay indoors. Unconfirmed media reports at this time, according to the French TV channel BFM TV, that the gunman is still on the loose. I can confirm that 2 people have been injured. Police officers did confirm that to me earlier. And I've seen 2 victims who've been taken away for medical treatment.
James, we were talking to somebody in a restaurant at the top of the hour who was involved in unsuccessful attempts to save the life of a Thai tourist. Presumably nothing has been specifically said about that, although the local prefecture is quoted by Reuters news agency as saying gunman kills 1, injures 10 in shooting in central Strasbourg. Judging by what you're seeing, given the police activity on the streets, they don't think this incident is over.
I mean, I'd be careful about speculating, but indeed there is a huge police presence out here in Strasbourg. As I say, all the central roads are being blocked off as we speak, and police are encouraging tourists and indeed members of the press to get away from where the incidents have taken place. as soon as possible. What I can tell you, about 30 minutes ago, I saw military officers also walking through the streets, heavily armed. This, of course, because France has been at a state of high terror alert over the past few months with regards to the recent terror attacks that have taken place on French soil. But, of course, as I say, no confirmation as to the motive or any further details about this incident.
Indeed. James Franey of France 24, thank you very much for filling us in on the latest there, and indeed keep safe yourself. Thank you. Let's just stay with the pictures from Strasbourg for just a few moments more to confirm what we know, and it is limited information, but we know that one person is dead after a shooting close to the Christmas market in Strasbourg. You can see the signs indicating the entrance there. As James was saying, these are narrow streets around the old part of Strasbourg, beautiful city in eastern France. The European Parliament is in session there, so there would have been quite a lot of security anyway, but obviously stepped up once news of this shooting emerged. It was about an hour and 40 minutes ago now that the first reports appeared, so it was a little after 8 o'clock local time, 7 o'clock UK time. We understand from one eyewitness that a tourist may have been the victim. There had been some unconfirmed reports that the gunman had been shot, but as James was indicating, people are being encouraged to evacuate and leave. Now, whether that means that they're at large or that they fear there may be others involved in this incident is not clear. There is no official confirmation of that. We do know, though, that President Macron cut short a meeting after being informed of the shooting in Strasbourg. He is being kept informed of the update, and he has dispatched the Interior Minister, Christophe Castaner, to Strasbourg on his behalf. That's quoting of the official, an official at the Elysee Palace, the President's official residence, talking to journalists in the last few moments. Let me bring you... Let's move on now to what would have been our top story this evening had the vote not been deferred in Parliament, which was due to take place at 7 this evening, and that is the Brexit information, which is that I'm just going to do the usual thing, which is try and read it off the screen, so excuse me for this. There are reports that Sir Graham Brady, who is the chairman of the Backbench 1922 committee, has asked for a meeting with the Prime Minister. Sir Graham, the significance of that is not merely that Sir Graham represents backbenchers, but it is potentially, at least, that tells us something about the prospects of a vote of no confidence in her leadership. Let's talk to our political correspondent, Ben Wright, who is at Westminster now. Ben, this is coming from our political editor, Laura Koonsberg. What do we know?
Yeah, Laura has just tweeted that she's hearing that she expects Sir Graham Brady to go and talk to the Prime Minister after PMQs tomorrow. All talk around leadership challenge, of course, needs to be heavily caveated. Yes. That the only person who really knows what's going on at this stage is Sir Graham Brady, the chair of the 1922 committee. He will know whether or not the letters are there or not to trigger a contest or a leadership vote in Theresa May's position. But certainly this evening there is a growing feeling around Westminster, a hardening of expectation that Eurosceptic Tory MPs feel that they've crossed the threshold, that they're there, that they've got the numbers. But as I said, all heavily caveated. We won't really know until we're told.
I was very struck by talking to George Freeman, a Theresa May loyalist, her former chair of her policy board, a former minister under David Cameron, talking about the possibility that it might be for the Prime Minister rather than backbenchers to decide her fate, and that there might be an argument for someone else on a caretaker basis to be in charge of this process until after Brexit. Is that a sense you picked up, that there is a feeling that perhaps someone else might get more out of Brussels, that they've kind of, you know, they've got fed up with her?
No, I don't get a sense that George Freeman's view is widely shared among Tory backbenchers, to be honest, or indeed members of the government. And I do think the mood has changed quite dramatically in the last 48 hours or so. Yeah, the party was braced, and the government was braced for a heavy defeat when the withdrawal agreement motion was put to MPs, as was meant to be happening this evening. But I think the way that it was pulled, the performance of the Prime Minister yesterday, going off to EU capitals today with very little hope that anything substantial can be changed in terms of the substance of the withdrawal agreement. All that, I think, has not helped her position among the Tory parliamentary party, and Remainers, actually, you talk to, have added their voices privately to those of the Brexiteers who've been saying for a long time that they're fed up of Theresa May's leadership. And you do feel that the mood has shifted, and if there is a contest, and it is a massive if, I think it's far more uncertain now what the outcome might be, as compared to what the outcome perhaps might have been had this actually happened 3 weeks ago, as looked likely when it looked like that ERG group, the Tory Brexiteers, were talking about having the numbers and triggering a contest, and in the end, of course, it didn't happen. I think the mood within the party is darker now, and I think the disappointment in Theresa May has hardened quite a bit, actually.
Just in terms of the practicalities of this, were Sir Graham to see the Prime Minister tomorrow and inform her that he has received the 48 letters that require him, he doesn't have any flexibility in this, does he? He has to begin the process of a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. How quickly could that take place? I mean, after all, MPs are at Westminster.
Yeah, there they are. I think when there was a confidence vote against Ian Duncan Smith, I think the ballot happened within about 24 hours. I think it can be jacked up pretty quickly. And of course, to win that vote of confidence, the Prime Minister only needs to get 50% plus one. It's a straight majority contest. If she doesn't, then it becomes a much wider and longer and more protracted leadership contest that, of course, will involve other candidates. It could potentially then involve a vote of the wider membership. It will become a more protracted process. And if this happens, then clearly the hope of the Brexiteers is that at the end of that process, they will have one of their own in number 10. And that's, the stakes of this are completely colossal. And MPs who may be asked to vote in a confidence vote in a confidence motion in the Prime Minister know that that is the case. They will be thinking, how will these various stages play out? What sort of Prime Minister could we have at the end of this if a leadership contest is triggered? But we're not there yet, Sean.
We're certainly not, and it sounds like we will know more potentially if this is correct about Sir Graham Brady requesting a meeting, assuming that's what it's about.
Yeah.
We will know that.
I should say as well, they've only got one shot at this. Actually, yes. There is one contest allowed every year, or a challenge like this allowed. So the Brexiteers, who are furious with Theresa May, they've got to time it well, because they've got one shot this side of Brexit anyway.
The key thing, of course, from it is that if she loses the no confidence